The wind from the west blows through a slot in the Rocky Mountains along Highway 80, and most of it goes right down this alleyway. And I want to paint a watercolor and gouache of the view down this alley. James Gurney here in Rawlins, Wyoming, alongside the train tracks on a bright, sunny, but windy day in September. What I like about this scene is the simple arrangement of lights and darks. You've got the shadow side of the building there, casting a shadow across the alleyway right here, and then the buildings on the far end of the alley are lit really strongly with shadow planes facing us. The foreshortened side of the building with all those windows back in there are just going to be sharp little shadow accents in the whole distant view. By the way, with the wind blowing this hard, I have to anchor down the tripods or they'll blow right over. Okay, this is take two with the mic in a better position. No, it's okay. And there's two ways to do that. If you have a hook underneath, you can hook a heavy backpack underneath the middle of the spreader. If you don't have a hook, you can use a carabiner to hold any kind of weight, and that sort of keeps the thing from blowing over quite as easily. Now I'm measuring with my pencil a unit of distance. From the edge of that shadowed building to that pole is the same as from the pole to just short of the corner of the building. So I check that and mark it on the page. It's also equal to the height up to the top of those poles. I also check the slope of the line of the shadow. This is a one-point perspective, which means that all of the horizontal lines that are parallel to the road going back are going to a single vanishing point. But because none of the surfaces are completely parallel, there's more than one vanishing point. Well, now I'm ready to paint. I put out a palette, which is just a metal lid from a pencil box painted white. And I'm using titanium white, ultramarine blue, burnt umber, burnt sienna, cadmium yellow deep, cadmium yellow light. And I'm going to paint the shadows first. Shadows are usually bluish or cool because they're lit by the blue of the sky. But sometimes areas are warm because they're lit as much by the reflected light from the warm ground. Now, still using the gouache mainly transparently, I lay in the rest of the areas of the ground and the sky. I have a choice here because I can leave the areas fairly transparent in the shadow and in the light, or I can build up some opaques using gouache. I tend to prefer a combination of transparent and opaque passages. The area in the shadow on the left is still mostly transparent, but as you can see, skipping ahead to the finish, I've got some opaque passages for all that detail. These opaque strokes, which I'm painting right over those pencil lines, have little variations from incomplete mixtures. I'm not worried about covering up the lines because I can always find them again. The edge between light and shadow is especially important. I want to give a little bit of an accent of chroma and a little lighter value right as that form turns from light to shadow. Now I can turn to those far poles, which get smaller and smaller as they disappear behind the gravel road. The poles are fairly warm because they're brown, lit by the warm light of the ground that's shining back into the shadows. So I'm using a brown color with a round synthetic brush, and I can use the very edge of the brush to get the tiniest poles in the distance. I always want to create that feeling that you can't quite see around the last bend, and the idea that the space in the distance is captured or framed by other elements. The wind is whipping the weeds and the bags and the wires. It's so windy that it's hard to control my hand to do good straight window details here. You can see that I painted that blue-gray color first, and I'm painting these smaller details over it. As the dry wind blows across my palette, it sucks the water out of the paint and turns it into chunks of dry powder. And as I stand here, I think of how hard it would have been for the early settlers to find water in some of these long, distant stretches of barren land. People would leave their extra supplies abandoned beside the Conestoga wagon tracks, heading west to a dream in California. You can still see the ruts of the Conestoga wagons not too far from here, and also in Nebraska. All these people powered by a dream, and some people stayed right here in Rawlins. A land of sunlight and shadow and wind and infinite spaces. Okay, thanks for watching. You might want to check out my website or subscribe to my channel. And then here's a playlist with more good stuff and a video that continues the story. So check them out and share with your friends.